night may be long and the dark may be deep, but the answers are there to be found. Whether it's the normal, the abnormal, or the paranormal, you're in the right place. Let's go beyond reality.
Good evening, good morning, and welcome. It's Beyond Reality Radio. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm J.V. Johnson. Jason has the night off tonight. He's going to be back with us next week. But tonight, we're Thursday going into Friday here, right? Yeah. This is our last live program for the week. Tomorrow night it'll be a best of on the show. And then we'll be back, obviously, Monday night with live programs again. And tonight's going to be another interesting show. We've had our guest tonight on before, Dr. Bruce Solheim. He is one of these folks that we call a paranormal lightning rod, or maybe some people call it a paranormal magnet. Either way, he's had a number of experiences that crosses paranormal genres, from ghosts to aliens to dimensional slips to cryptids to basically any type of paranormal experience that you can have. Dr. Bruce Solheim, our guest tonight, has had it, and he's written about it in two books, actually. The first book was called Timeless, and that's the book we talked about when he was on the program last. Well, he has a new book out, and it's called Timeless Deja Vu, and it talks about another 31 experiences from Dr. Solheim's life that, again, cover topics such as ghost telepathy, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, premonitions, spirit animals, quantum personal reality, and, of course, as the title would indicate, deja vu. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight with Bruce Solheim. So I'm excited about that. You should also know we've got some really terrific programs coming up next week that you need to be here for. Or if you listen to the show after the next day or whatever as a download, or on the YouTube channel, wherever it happens to be, that's okay too. But you're going to want to listen to these shows. Monday night, we have a very, very special guest coming to the show. We had a guest last week or the week before, Joe McQuillan, who wrote a book called Searching for Christopher on the Other Side, if I remember correctly. Something very close to that, if that's not right. And that book was about his 2-year quest to reach his son, who had tragically died previously in an accident. And he was successful in reaching his son. He writes about it in that book that I referenced. And during that discussion, we had a caller who frequently calls the show. TJ is his name. And TJ mentioned a gentleman by the name of David Kane. And he asked our guest, Joe McQuillan, if he had talked to or had any contact with David Kane. And I can't remember if Joe had. I think he was aware of David's story. Well, David Kane will be our guest Monday night. And David Kane is the father of a son who passed away in the Rhode Island nightclub fire. I'm sure you remember that. Great White was performing, and they had a pyrotechnic show, and that went horribly wrong. It caught the club on fire, and many people just couldn't get out, and they passed away. And David's son was one of those folks. And David has spent a great deal of time trying to reach his son on the other side. And he's written a book called Signs from My Son about that experience. And we're going to be talking with David Monday night on the program. So that's going to be probably a very heart-touching and heart-warming discussion on the program here. Tuesday night, we've got Lyle Blackburn joining us. He is a well-known cryptid researcher. We'll be talking about all manner of cryptids, including Bigfoot. But he's written a new book called Momo, M-O-M-O, Momo, The Strange Case of the Missouri Monster. That book was released earlier this month, and we'll be talking about that. We also have Andrea Pileski coming on the program, and Andy Thomas. Andy's a researcher and an author on mysteries and conspiracies. We're going to be talking about conspiracies and global freedom issues. Those are things he lectures about, and we'll have a chance to talk with him Thursday night's program next week. So, and in fact, I should mention that I will be away. I'm actually headed out on a mini vacation. Well, maybe it's not so mini. It's going to be for a good week or more. And Bruce Markuson will be filling in on the show starting next Thursday. So that conversation with Andy Thomas, Bruce the Shark Markuson, will be here hosting that for us all. So he always does a great job, and I appreciate him stepping in when I can't be here. So looking forward to tonight, looking forward to next week's programs. In the meantime, you all have a few minutes while you're listening to the show. Stop by Facebook, give the Beyond Reality Radio Facebook page a like. Also, give my page a like, JV Johnson. You can find it that way, or you can search JVJ Paranormal. And give it a like so you can follow what we're up to. You know, a lot of stuff going on here. We don't just post about what the show's featuring in any given night. We're posting all the time. And if you haven't found the YouTube channel, swing by YouTube, search for JV Johnson. You'll find it. It's got a lot of great archives there. Plus, we feature some unique videos throughout the course of the week. And we've got some special things in the works for that channel. So if you could subscribe, click the little bell icon, because that lets you know when we go live or when we upload something. It just gives you a little bit of an alert. If you don't click the bell, you still subscribe, but you just won't get those notifications, and you'll see them when you log into YouTube. So that'll work as well. Oh, let's see. Beyond Reality Radio coffee mug, still flying out the door, makes a great addition to your morning table when you're drinking your coffee, or your evening coffee table, I guess they're called, when you're drinking your tea at night, or hot chocolate, or whatever. Holding pens. That's what one of mine does. Does a nice job of holding my pens right here for me. You can find it on the Beyond Reality Radio webpage, beyondrealityradio.com. Okay, so we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll get our guest on the phone, Dr. Bruce Solheim, tonight. We're talking about his new book. It's called Timeless Deja Vu, a Paranormal Personal History on Beyond Reality Radio. Please support the program. Go to patreon.com/Johaw. That's JOHAW. Welcome back to the program. Hey, I'm being told that a couple of our affiliates have preempted the show tonight because of some basketball games. I guess we're in the middle of March Madness. I don't follow that stuff very closely because the team that I would root for doesn't make it very far, so I tend to avoid paying any attention to it at all. But if that's the case, if any of the shows get preempted at any point for you, you can find the show as a podcast. Just subscribe to it on iTunes, or you can get it off the Beyond Reality Radio mobile app for your smartphone. Again, when you go to find it, it's Beyond Reality Radio Mobile. There are a couple of, there's an old one there that keeps popping up for some reason. I don't know. I don't have any of these technical abilities to understand why that happens, but it does. And then you can also find the archive of the show on the YouTube channel. Just search JV Johnson on YouTube and you'll find that. But anyway, we've got a great show set up for you tonight, and we're excited to have our guest back with us. He's been here before, Dr. Bruce Solheim. We're going to be talking about his new book called Timeless Deja Vu. You can also go to his website and get more information about his books and his other work at Bruce Olav, O-L-A-V, Solheim.com. Bruce, it's great to have you back on Beyond Reality Radio.
Well, thank you, JV. It's great to be back. A lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, apparently a lot. We've been talking about this discussion coming up here for the last week or so. And, one of the things, and I think we mentioned it before when you were on the program, there are certain people that walk through life that kind of have this, they kind of become a lightning rod for paranormal type activity, or a magnet, if you will. You seem to be one of those people, aren't you?
Well, definitely. Yeah, things keep happening. And the good news is that I seem to be able to, rather than just happening randomly and frequently and randomly, I seem to have a little bit more control. I wouldn't say control, but I seem to be able to guide it a little bit better now that I understand it a bit more. So, and so that's the good news. But it can be very overwhelming for folks,
Well, I suppose when you get used to these things happening, you can accept them a little more easily than, the person who might have one thing happen to them in their lives, can't explain it, never get an opportunity to recreate it. And you say you said control, but that wasn't really the word you were looking for. Maybe manage. I'm not sure. But what do you mean by that? Do you mean that you're able to deal with it better, or you can actually kind of affect it and make it happen?
Well, probably a little bit of both, and the main thing is that I can protect myself a little bit better. And I'll give you an example. It's not in this book, but it's going to actually be in the book, the next one, because it's going to be a trilogy. And it was an experience in Chicago. And if you don't mind, I'll just tell you quickly about that. The purpose of having these gifts, I think, is very important, and I kind of got off the rails a little bit after I was on a radio show last time, kind of doing the circuit there, and somebody had called me up. He's a TV producer, film producer, and wanted to do a test pilot show, of me going to different sites and It's kind of like the other paranormal shows, but it had a little bit more of a different kind of a twist, using my historical background. My
right.
Having a PhD in history, and so kind of going to historical sites and so forth. But so he flew me out and my wife out to Chicago, and we did this. We went to different places, and the first day it was okay. I was a little rusty, and didn't know exactly what he wanted. The second day, and this is where it really became rather frightening. He took me to a site, and he gave me very little information. He just said, I didn't know where the place was. It was the south side of Chicago. I'm not that familiar with Chicago. And he told me, it's a very dark place, very dark. And so I knew it was something, but at the same time, I wanted to impress this guy with what I could pick up. So here's where I fell into the kind of the hubris, of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened myself up. I opened the aperture wide up, wide open. And it was okay the day before because it was relatively harmless haunted places, but this place was different, and I didn't know. And the first thing I picked up on in the south side of Chicago was I saw everything, like the streets were filled with just kinetic energy, and all these people in 1800s, the late 1800s clothes, horses and buggies and, wagons going by. Everything was moving. It was kind of interesting. And then, in my mind's eye, I'm seeing this. And then I saw this one man just standing there, and he was standing still. He was the only person standing still, and he was looking directly at me as if he knew, other things I was watching a movie or something. But he knew I was there. He had a feel, he knew I was there. And he had a bowler hat, and he had this big, funny 1800s mustache or whatever, and dark, coat, long coat, and he's just staring at me. And I got this very bad feeling. And rather than pull out of the whole thing and just say, let's get out of here, which is what everything was telling me, I wanted to impress this guy who was filming, right? Which is dumb. But anyway, so I kept going, and I was in this alleyway in between an Aldi's parking lot and an old post office in south side of Chicago. I didn't know where it was. It was a very bad neighborhood. That's all I knew. And I was attacked. I was physically and psychically attacked, and that is, I've never been physically attacked. I've been psychically attacked by entities, but never physically. And I was thrown down to the ground and held down. And the worst part of it, I'm a big guy, so it takes a lot to push me down and hold me down. I felt like somebody was on my back, holding me down. And when I was on the ground, I felt like just hopelessness and despair, and like I couldn't do anything to save myself. It was just like I was going to give up. And then finally I fought through it, and I got up, and I saw all these dead bodies, just literally dozens and maybe over 100 dead bodies, and people in, torture chambers and stuff like that. And I was telling the guy this, and then I said, I have to go, because I hurt myself, and I'm still actually injured from it. And that was in January.
Wow.
And we went back to the car. He stopped filming, and I said, what is this place? Don't ever take me to a place like this. I felt like I was blindsided. And he said it was the site of we were right next to the site of the H.H. Holmes murder hotel.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. And,
that's exactly what I thought.
I think the figure that I saw at first was H.H. Holmes.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought when you described the figure. Yeah.
So it was a lesson, and then the one after that was not much better. It was better. It wasn't quite as scary, but it was also like a haunted, demonic tattoo parlor. It was in north side of Chicago, but. And I also kind of got, not as badly. I didn't get physically hurt there, but it was a psychic attack. And it was the site of a murder, and I picked up on all kinds of stuff. And after this experience in Chicago, I just said, this is not what I want to do. This is not what I want to do. And it's fine for some people. They can do that, and that's fine. But I decided I kind of fell into a trap there. What do I really want to do with these talents? Do I just want to help people, or do I want to, put on a show or something? But what do I do? I don't want to do that. I'm a teacher. I'm a writer, and I just want to help people with the abilities that I have. Help friends, help family, or people that ask me, and not do it for show, not do it for money, not. I write books about these experiences. Sure, you make money off of the books, but that's the extent of it. So it was really a very powerful lesson about, well, for one, how powerful this evil stuff is, and also how you can fall into a trap, even if you're not trying to do anything evil. You're just opening yourself up too much. So this idea of protection is so important, knowing what you're going into. Don't get blindsided. Don't fall into that kind of a trap. And I don't think the TV producer was a bad guy. He just, he was doing what he does, Hey, let's get some dramatic footage.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's go to the next site. He wasn't, psychic.
Yeah.
So, or not very much anyway.
We've got about a minute here before break, and I want to ask
Sure.
about that experience, because you were physically attacked in addition to being psychically attacked.
Yes.
Did you see in your mind's eye, was it H.H. Holmes, or that figure that you think was H.H. Holmes attacking you physically?
Yeah, well, I didn't see him after that initial. Yeah. He was the only person that wasn't moving. So
right.
Everything else was just like a movie playing, but he seemed like he was right there.
So you
and
assume.
As soon as I walked into the alleyway, I didn't see him anymore. But then it's like he came from behind me. I didn't see him. I literally blindsided, like I was playing, like poor Joe Theismann, when he got blindsided.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And I was down on the ground, and I'm a big guy. I'm about 6'3", about 260.
Yeah.
That takes a lot to put me down on the ground, and to keep me down there, and to have me feel total despair. That was probably the worst part.
Yeah.
Was this total despair, like I'd given up, And
a quick question, quickly, did they capture this on film?
He had me on audio, and then he came and filmed, because what we do the audio first, and then he comes and films. So the attack was not on film, but it was on audio. Mm-hmm. And what's weird is when you hear it on audio, I'm kind of laughing.
Oh, really?
As if I'm high or something, which I don't drink. I don't use drugs. It was a...
Our guest tonight, Dr. Bruce Solheim, author of the book Timeless Deja Vu. He's also author of the book that preceded that called Timeless. And as he just told us, it's going to be a trilogy, 3 books in all. I wanted to ask you, Bruce, about going back to the experience you had where you think you may have encountered H.H. Holmes. You talked about a physical interaction, a psychic interaction. When you have something like that, when you're in that state and you have that vision, can you communicate with whatever you're seeing?
I usually can. I usually can. In this case, I did not communicate with him, and like I said, I'd only saw him right there at the beginning, and then as I started walking down this alley that kind of goes behind the post office and by the Aldi's parking lot, I didn't see him then, but I certainly felt his presence. I assumed it was his presence because it was extremely evil. That's the only way I can describe it. Yeah. And just, I can usually communicate with entities, but I did not attempt to communicate. I just was, at that point, I was just trying to survive and get out of that situation. And like I said, I just was caught so off guard and blindsided that I was acting very strange and for me, because I'm a fighter, and to have that kind of the fight taken out of me, even momentarily like that, was shocking. But it kind of fits with the story of what, he was a doctor, and he, nobody expects when they go to a doctor that they're going to be tortured and killed, So yeah. I think he used, and that's the feeling I got too, is that people were betrayed. These people were betrayed. Their trust was betrayed, and with him, I did not have any direct communication. No, Tan. That's a long answer to your question, but yeah.
How long have you been aware of your sensitivities and your connection with these paranormal phenomena?
Yeah, well, since in the first book I talk about my first experience at age 4. It was a very, as opposed to what happened in Chicago, it was an angelic experience in northern Norway, and that's what got me started. That opened the floodgates. And maybe turned me into what you call a lightning rod for the paranormal. Of course, my mom was psychic, so it's hereditary, and she accepted my my otherworldliness, the odd things that I would say, and like a lot of kids, I had invisible playmates, but my mom didn't try to convince me that they weren't there. I think she played right along with it because she was psychic herself, so. and we did practice mind reading stuff, and we would talk about astrology, we would talk about ESP. So it was a very normal thing with me and my mom. So it really just started then, and it just continued through in my life till now, when I'm 60 years old. And in this latest book, I left out some things in the first book because, to be honest, I was trying to test the waters,
right?
Because I was a little bit afraid. I think I said last time we talked about the reaction of the college, where I work, because I'm still full-time professor, and my colleagues and readers for that matter. It's like, who is this guy? And but it was such a good. It was well received, and by my colleagues, by the administration, who actually let me teach a paranormal class, which nobody was more shocked than I was that they let me do that. And so I think I'm going to go further, and I'm going to go deeper with this next book, with Deja Vu. And I did. I went back and told some stories that I held back from the first one, and some of them are pretty painful. Things like the experience with my Nazi aunt. And I know it sounds weird, but I had an actual Nazi aunt.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. That's one of the ones that I made a note on that I wanted to talk about, because that's quite a story. Let's hold that for a minute, though, because I do want to talk about that one. But I want to get more of your history too, because you were born in Seattle, but your parents are Norwegian, and you've been to Norway many times. I think you still have a home there. But does that Norwegian connection, open up some of this for you? Is there anything genetically or culturally that gives you some of these sensitivities?
Yeah, despite the fact that my mom was psychic and her mother was an herbalist and a healer, and it's our home, where we're from, is 200 miles above the Arctic Circle, and it's a remote island. And when I had my first angelic experience, there are no hospitals there on the island, so everybody just, kind of takes care of themselves. And because of that remoteness, people are closer to the earth. They're closer to the paranormal, I would say. I would say it's really not paranormal to them. It's more normal. They live with ghosts. They live with these entities. And there are ghosts all over the place on that island, including our old house, which is now about 120 years old. Every time I go there, there's the spirits of my ancestors are there, and you just can't be in that house without, them visiting you at some time during the day or during the night. And even people that are somewhat skeptical, like my wife, had an experience with who we think was my father. She was sitting in the kitchen, and she still is trying to sort it out. What it was. I told her exactly what it was, but she's skeptical, which is not a bad thing. But it is a place that kind of fosters that kind of stuff. So I think it was just natural to me. The paranormal was normal, the supernatural was natural. And people in northern Norway are like that. They're very folksy. They're very informal. You get further south in Norway, it's much more European and much more continental European. As you get down to Oslo, the capital city, and way up north, people are kind of rough-hewn type people. Salt of the earth type fishermen, farmers, that type.
Yeah, I imagine you have to be. These experiences started for you at 4 years old, and you've had so many of them. Would you say that a majority of them, or any kind of significant percentage of them, other people have shared with you, or they've all been very private and personal?
Of the experiences that I've had, have I shared all of them?
Well, if you saw a ghost, was there someone else next to you seeing the same ghost, kind of thing? Are those shared experiences, or are they private and personal?
Some are shared experiences. An experience that I had in Austria with my first wife. Her family was from Austria, and we saw her grandmother as just the apparition. She was a full-bodied apparition we were sleeping in her grandmother's room. We talked to each other, my ex-wife and I, and we were saying, do you see what I see? Yes, I see what you see. And so that, I've had a few of those shared experiences that, that's pretty unbelievable, or things that have been backed up immediately after it happened, like my full-bodied apparition ghost experience at the Colby Sawyer College in New Hampshire, in New London, New Hampshire. It was backed up by students at the college, by the guy who was cleaning the streets the next day after I had the ghost experience, and he said, "Oh yeah, they got you in that haunted building. Everybody knows that place is haunted." But I have had shared experiences where the experience happened at the same time too, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to kind of determine whether or not you happened to be in the right place at the right time, why some of these things happened to you, or if something would happen and you'd see it, the person next to you might not see it, which meaning that you had a heightened ability to see through the veil, if you will.
Yeah, I don't think I've had an experience where I was with somebody else and I saw something and they did not.
Gotcha.
So I was either alone or I was with somebody who did experience the same thing, at least something, maybe not exactly the same as we're all a little different, but I think that most of it's happened, to me myself. I think, and I don't know if there's a reason for that. Maybe the entities realize who they're going to be successful with. It's like if my aperture is open or whatever, my radar is out. Entities are going to be attracted to that, not to somebody who's closed, who they're not going to have any impact on or get through to. They're going to, especially the ones that are more mischievous or maybe even have malevolent type intentions. They're going to go for the most susceptible person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's the way it works, as far as I can tell. Anyway.
You've had so many experiences. You've got you've got a family, and prior to that, when you were younger, you were with your family. Did you ever feel threatened, or do you feel like your family was ever threatened by any of these experiences?
Yes, I think that when I think about. Well, I'll just give you a recent example. It's not in this book, but it's just something that happened recently. And it wasn't necessarily, it was more annoying than threatening, but it is rather scary nonetheless. Mm-hmm. I've had a few experiences in our house where we're living where I've noticed, especially the last year, as I've had what I call this spiritual reawakening, there have been times where you feel like there's somebody in the room, but you don't necessarily see them. You just get the feeling. Other times you see shadows. I've seen shadows, and I've also had the feeling that the bed is shaking when there's not an earthquake going on, and also blanket tugging too, which is a very disturbing type thing. And what was interesting is that my youngest son's been having trouble sleeping. He's 19 years old. And I asked him about it, and he's told me before that he's seen things in moving in the hallway when he was here alone. And then I asked him about, well, what about when you're sleeping? And he said, well, there's this annoying thing with the blankets. And I said, you're kidding me. He said that it's like somebody's tugging on the blankets, and I just tug it back, and then they start tugging again, and then the bed starts shaking. And so I finally said, okay, something's got to give here. We can't have this in the house. I didn't know if I was bringing it in because I make these spirit connections and maybe I'm bringing it back. And this comes back to our first thing we talked about, protection, knowing how to protect yourself from all this stuff, especially if you're wide open to it. And so I decided I would have a friend of mine who's a shaman in the in the Peruvian tradition. And she came here and did a cleansing of the house, and she identified them as kind of like earth spirits. They weren't necessarily evil or anything. They were just kind of mischievous and liked the energy. What was interesting, they were just going after myself and my son, not my wife, and not our friend who's female who comes and stays at the house sometimes. They didn't bother them at all. It was just me and my son that they would bother. So for some reason, they liked our energy, and they preferred my son's energy over mine. So when he was away from the house, then that's when I would feel something. So, but now it's gone. So that's good.
When you describe
good.
Earth spirits, is that like the same thing as maybe an elemental spirit?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they weren't necessarily bad, but they were very annoying. And it is unnerving.
Sure.
Especially if you're home alone and you get this feeling you're not alone here in the house, and then you can't sleep because things are pulling your blankets. And I've done some reading on it, because it's not like everybody tells me that this happens to them. So I found out it's not that uncommon to have this kind of mischievous kind of stuff going on in your home, and you do have to clear it out. And I've learned from the shaman and other very experienced mediums who've been doing this for a living, who do this, have had thousands of readings. They tell me, no, you got to do a better job of clearing yourself before you come back to the house. You can't go out and, like I do, I go out and open the aperture and I do my meditative walks and communicate with those in the spirit world. I have to go through a procedure before I come back in the house. And I didn't realize that I had to be a little bit more methodical about that and a little bit more careful. And because you start attracting this stuff and collecting it, and that's not good.
Yeah. Our guest tonight, Dr. Bruce Solheim, he's the author of a book, Timeless Deja Vu, and he has a book that precedes that called Timeless, and there's going to be another one. It'll be a trilogy, and these are collections of personal paranormal experiences. And Bruce, this is a really short segment here, but I think we have enough time for you to tell us why you decided to take your lifetime of experiences and put it into book form for people.
Well, this happened because of a spiritual reawakening I had after a dear friend of mine, childhood friend, died in 2016. And I had been collecting stories, but hadn't really talked to too many people about them. And he came to me in a vision, a very clear vision after he had died, and convinced me that now was the time to tell these stories, and even gave me the title, Timeless. And it emboldened me. It gave me the audacity, I guess, to tell these stories and move beyond my fear of retribution by my peers and the administration and my colleagues and my profession. And I was able to do that. And I'm really glad that I did, because this spiritual reawakening has been very, very important for me. And I think I'm helping people. And that's the idea I get, with the books and with the class that I teach. And reaching out to people who come to me and ask me to communicate with their loved ones, and which I do, not often. I mean, I don't do it for a living. I don't get payment for it. I just do it as a favor for people that ask me. And it's been a beautiful and wonderful experience. So,
did you get ridicule and or scorn from your profession when you published the first book?
The worst I got was somebody had said, "Well, that's really weird," and some people just kind of, they were kind of dumbstruck, like they didn't say anything, but they didn't ridicule me or anything. The worst thing was said is actually by a history graduate student, a friend of mine, her daughter, who I had as I was kind of a mentor for her, and she's in graduate school in a PhD program now, and she told her mother after she read the book, he has just committed academic suicide. But that's an opinion of a graduate student, and they have to, they're like walking on eggshells until they get their PhD in hand. So I understand the viewpoint that they'd have. They've got to toe the line and so forth, and not take too many chances outside of the things that wouldn't be generally accepted by their doctoral committees.
Yeah.
But at this point in my career, at age 60 and probably another 4 years to go till I retire, or so, 4.5 years, I really didn't. What can they do to me?
Right.
There's not really much they can do to me, and really the response has been very good. A lot of people, colleagues have taken the class. Two of my colleagues have taken the class, and others have said they're going to, and still others have come up to me and kind of looked around to see if anybody was listening, and, hey, I got to tell you about my experience. And so they feel like I'm a safe person to talk to. So I feel like it's been overall a very positive thing. And interesting people have contacted me that have helped me, opened up my eyes to other things that I was kind of closed about. And I wrote about some of those, and what prompted me to have some experiences that I talk about in Deja Vu that went a little bit further and deeper than the first book. So.
Yeah. One of the things that always gives me a bit of a chuckle is that in our line of work, we encounter people that just are completely skeptical or just completely closed-minded in some cases to the ideas.
Yeah.
And they'll express that opinion, and then they'll say, "But you know what happened to me when I was 8 years old?" And then they have a story, which I find very, very, very interesting. Because everybody seems to have made this connection somewhere along the way. It just not everybody accepts it or is curious enough to ask any more questions beyond that. We've got to go to break here,
Sure.
but just one more thing about professionally. Do you feel as though these topics are a little more generally accepted in the course of communication versus maybe 10, 15 years ago, and very quickly?
I believe so. I think we're in a paradigm shift, and I'm not the only one that thinks that. I've talked to Dean Radin about it, Dr. Dean Radin at IONS, Institute of Noetic Sciences, and others.
Right, we'll pick it up when we come back. It's Beyond Reality Radio. Did you know that online retailers like Amazon have constant deals that can save you money on the things you buy every day? It's no joke. Save 40%, 50%, even 80% on great products, and all you have to do is know about them. Noodle Shark is the way to be alerted when something good is coming your way. Noodle Shark is the social media page that lists great deals that not only save you money, but give you the deals before anyone else has them. All you have to do is find Noodle Shark on Facebook. Search it as The Noodle Shark. That's The Noodle Shark, because you deserve to save too. Become a shark and save. Thanks for being here with me. We have a great conversation underway with Dr. Bruce Solheim. We'll bring him back in just a moment, talking about his book, Timeless Deja Vu. In the meantime, a couple of programming notes. Tomorrow night is a best-of program. Monday night, we've got David Kane joining the program. And if you've been listening for a while, you know that David Kane is the father of a boy that was killed in the tragic nightclub fire in Rhode Island years ago when the band Great White had a pyrotechnic show that went horribly wrong, and people were trapped inside that building, and many lost their lives. And David has spent some time trying to contact his son on the other side, and he's written a book called Signs from My Son. And we'll be talking with David Monday night on the program. Tuesday night, Lyle Blackburn, he is an author and a well-known cryptid researcher, will be here to talk about Bigfoot, cryptids in general, plus a new book that he's written. It's called Momo, The Strange Case of the Missouri Monster. It was released on March 5th, so we'll be introduced to that creature and the research that's gone into it on Tuesday night's program. Wednesday night, Andrea Pelesci will be here, and Thursday night, Andy Thomas will be our guest. Andy's a researcher and an author on mysteries and conspiracies, so we're going to be talking about conspiracies on Thursday night's program next week. And that will be with Bruce Markison. The Shark will be sitting in for me on next Thursday night's program, and he'll be handling the show for the following full week, as I will be taking some time in Orlando. Looking forward to that, getting into some sunshine, because even though the calendar says spring here in upstate New York, it is anything but spring-like, I can tell you that. So you'll have some time with Bruce Markison handling the show. He does a great job. We'll also be introducing a new producer to the show next week. Orion is his name. Will be stepping into Alex's shoes. And Alex has done a great job for the program for, 3 years. And she's moving on to some bigger and better things. She'll be around to help out now and then. But Slick is going to have to turn to Orion as his right-hand person starting next week. I think he trains a couple days, and then we'll be taking over actually the day that the Shark will be in here, that Bruce will be in. So that'll be next Thursday. Anyway, a lot of great stuff going on. Please stop by the Facebook page, like it, Beyond Reality Radio. Also my personal Facebook page, JV Johnson, and swing by the YouTube page. That's also JV Johnson. Love to have you subscribe, like, hit notifications, whatever you have to do. Click all the things you need to click and be part of all of those media. I appreciate that. Again, our guest tonight, Dr. Bruce Solheim. We're talking about his new book called Timeless Deja Vu. And Bruce, you have a book that's been out for a while called Timeless. That was your first collection of personal paranormal experiences. You followed it up with this one. And I think you mentioned that the second go-around with this book, you went a little edgier. You had some stories that you held back because you weren't sure how the whole idea would be accepted. But in the new book, you kind of unleashed those, didn't you?
Yes, I did, JV. I decided that I'm just going to let it all hang out. And then in the third book, I've already got a title for it. I'm already writing it. I'm probably about halfway through with it. I call it Timeless Trinity. It's going to be the most spiritual of the three, but not in a traditional way. So I keep going farther and deeper, further and deeper, and hopefully the readers will come along with me.
But these experiences continue to happen to you. They haven't ended, right?
Yeah.
You keep having these things happen.
Yes, they're continuous, and some that like I said, I don't like to use the word control. That I invite, like I'll take my spirit walks and I'll connect with my spirit guides, and also this ancient alien that I've talked about in the latest book. So I will do that on purpose. But other things just happen, like the elementals that were in the house. Obviously, I didn't on purpose invite those in here, but nevertheless, we have to deal with them. And so, So I'm still a lightning rod, but I think I'm starting to be able to. I don't know. Maybe the word manage is better. Manage it better than I have in the past. But it happens all the time. Yeah.
One of the reviews on the back of the book Timeless Deja Vu says that you share a sympathetic hand of comfort. Was one of the motivating factors behind writing these books to help people who have similar experiences deal with it?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think, well, the one thing is that I didn't want people to fear death so much, because especially my friend Gene, who inspired the first book, has really helped me with that, and so have my spirit guides and the ancient alien that I mentioned before. But Gene especially helped me understand that that this, what I'm communicating with is his essence, is his spirit. So he is not gone. He's gone from this physical world, but he is not gone from the universe. And so I think we have less to fear than people imagine. And of course, if you're in such fear, you're not really going to live your life. You're not going to have a full, satisfying spiritual life, and you're just going to be so restricted and bottled up. And I think that that's not good for people. And helping people understand these things is, by putting it out there and saying, this has happened to me. I'm a very flawed human being, but I do have these gifts that have been given to me, and I don't want to frivolously use them. And as one spirit said to me, it was actually a friend of mine who had a colleague of his pass away who he's very close to, and he asked me to connect with her, and I did, and she said some really wonderful things about him and told me some interesting things. But the most interesting thing she said is that, and she said it to me, she said, you realize what your mission is. Your mission is to alleviate the suffering of others. And wow. She said, I think you understand that better now. So I didn't ask her the question, hey, what do you think my mission is? She just offered that to me. So it's, just when you think, you think I got a pretty good bead on things, something new comes up. And I think that's extremely important. I know the late Jim Mars, I think he passed away 2 years ago or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theorist. Yep. And he was just all over the place with, about everything. Mm-hmm. But he said that he said something about a boggle point, that people reach a boggle point and they just cannot fathom anymore. What is this strange thing? And I think we gradually move beyond the boggle point only to encounter another boggle point, and I think that's just, it's a journey that, in this lifetime, we're going to be making every day if you're open to it. And I think that's what I am. I'm open to learning and writing these books and delving deeper into what's happened to me and trying to come up with a framework of understanding and teaching the class and meeting wonderful people and being on the radio with folks like yourself. And I mean, this is how we grow as people, as individuals, as spirits. Yeah.
I also noticed in the book that you dedicated it, or mentioned anyway, God and your spirit guides, and you have mentioned them by name, Theodora and Ozzy, and some other. Yes. Tell us about your relationship with your spirit guides. How often do you communicate them? And I mean, you obviously seem like you are very familiar with them.
Yes, every time I take my, because I can't do sitting meditation, I have to do walking meditation. So I take a spirit walk, as I call it, and I will communicate with them first. I'll ask for them to help raise me to a higher level where I can communicate in the spirit world, and really importantly, to be gatekeepers and protect me, because they've been protecting me since the beginning, since I was born, especially at age 4 and to this day. So I always appeal to them first, and I say prayers day, in the morning. I say prayers in the evening. So my spirituality's always been there, and I don't, see this idea of believing in God or the idea of knowing that God exists. I think for me, it's more experience knowing that God exists, and these spirit guides and helpers in the spirit world is not incongruous with my belief in God or my experience with God. So, as one of my friends said, if God isn't paranormal, who is? Which I think is a pretty cool statement. But yeah, I use my spirit guides every time I communicate to protect me, and that's really important. That's like I said, the Chicago experience really made me think everything. People offer me things. They'll say, "Hey, we want you to join our physical mediumship group." And I say, "Well, what are you guys doing?" And I get a red flag, and I said, "No, that's okay. It's wonderful what you're doing, but I have other stuff I got to do, and God bless you. I hope it works out for you." But I'm much more cautious. I am willing to explore things that I try to move beyond the boggle point, but I do so cautiously and with protection, and I think that's good advice for anybody who's on this path.
Dr. Bruce Solheim is our guest. You can check out his website, which has his books and his work, Bruce Olav, O-L-A-V, Solheim.com. And there's a lot of great information there. And as I teased before we went into break, one of the stories that you started to talk about, and I stopped you, Bruce, was the story of your Nazi aunt. We've got about 6 minutes in this segment, so why don't you tell us that story?
Okay, it's a long story, but I will tell it quickly. Just my Nazi aunt, she actually was a real Nazi, not a neo-Nazi. She was part of the Gestapo in Norway when the Germans invaded Norway in April 1940. She joined and was part of them. She's in her early 20s. She's my dad's younger sister, and she was instrumental in helping capture members of the underground. So long story short, with that experience, she was convicted of war crimes and sentenced to death after the liberation. But my war hero uncle, who was a convoy commander, used his experience and all of his money to get her sentence commuted to life. And then she only did 9 years and came out, but of prison on an insanity. She said that she was going insane or whatever, so that got her out. I encountered her many times when we visited Norway, and the one I wrote about that was the most, the one that was the hardest one to write about, the hardest story I've written in my books, actually, was an encounter I had with her in 1973 when she came to visit us in Seattle, and I think I was 15 years old then. And that was the first time I'd noticed how attractive she was. Now, part of it, she really was an attractive lady, and she was very, shapely figure, took care of herself, always perfectly, coiffed and put together. And she had kind of an allure about her, kind of like a movie star or something. And then there was the mystique of her, that nobody ever spoke about, the fact that she had, been convicted of war crimes. So, that was the time when in the middle of the night, she was in my room for no apparent reason, other than the feeling I had was that there was some kind of sexual activity going on. And the oddest thing other than that, which was very odd, was that there were, from what I remember, there were people watching us, but it wasn't my family. And I had this idea that there were these little entities there with her. So I didn't know what to think of it. Was it demonic? Was it some kind of, alien stuff? What was it? I didn't quite understand it, but it was clear that something had happened between her and me, and it was, something that she had perpetrated, because I was pretty naive at 15, even though I was 15. Later on, some weird things started happening. Like a year or two after that, I started noticing I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd had, these little entity things I'd have in my dreams. I woke up one time. I was in the forest by our house in the middle of the night, like running through the darkness, like I could, fly through the woods. It was the weirdest kind of thing. I could jump up onto like my brother's garage roof, and this bizarre stuff started happening, and then I visited her again in 1992, and I stayed with her because there's no place else to stay, and I was doing my doctoral research, and she. By that time, she's 38 years older than me, so she was in her early 70s, but she was still a very attractive lady, and she had this allure. It's like she had some kind of binding power over me or whatever, and nothing happened that time, but it was very bizarre. She, instead of having me use the bathroom upstairs where there was a shower, she said, "I want you to use my bathroom, my tub, whatever." And I had this weird feeling that she was watching me the whole time, and so it was just a very bizarre situation with her, and it was really hard to write about. It's hard to talk about right now.
Yeah.
And the whole story just really came out in public about her being a Nazi in 2009 when my cousin, who's now passed away, wrote about her, and it caused a big controversy in the family and even in the country. Re-questioning this whole idea of the occupation. So here I was caught up in the middle of it more than I had ever thought, because I'd kind of suppressed these memories about it. But it was quite damaging to me as a young man to have had this experience with this lady. And so the bottom line of the story is that evil attracts evil, whether it's terrestrial or alien or whatever. And I think that there is some information out there about how the Nazis may have been involved with some type of alien presence or whatever, and she certainly was a Nazi. She was in the thick of things there in Oslo and worked with the Gestapo colonel in charge.
Thank you to all the radio stations carrying the program around the country as that list continues to grow. We welcome all those stations to our family of affiliates. Our guest tonight, Dr. Bruce Solheim, we're talking about his new book called Timeless Deja Vu, a paranormal personal history. And before we went to break, Bruce, you were talking about the story that's included in the book about your Nazi aunt, and I have a couple of questions about that.
Sure.
Is it your opinion that your aunt was, and this is a word that you used, evil?
Yes. I think she was at least being manipulated by evil. She had invited it and was being used by evil. And I think the Nazi colonel she was working for, the SS colonel, obviously was very evil. And I think that evil attracts evil.
And so, therefore, yes. Do you think in the, particularly the experience you told us about when you were 15 years old and she was visiting you in Seattle, where you saw little figures or beings of some kind, do you think she was the conduit for those beings to appear, whether they were alien beings or demonic beings or whatever they were?
Yes. Yes, I think that she, attracted them. She had them with her. And it was depicted in the. I had my friend, and I didn't mention yet, my friend Gary Dumm, who does the illustrations for the book, the brilliant illustrations. He captured it perfectly. I mean, I described it in the story, but I'm looking at the picture right now. It's very frightening to me. And by the way, I had never told this other than writing it having this in my head and writing it in the book. I've never talked about it to anybody, and you're the first person I've talked to about it out loud, and now it's on the radio, whatever. But so it's very unnerving to think about it. But yes, I don't know if they were demonic. I think now that I've had some experience with realizing that I've had some alien experience. I think it was more alien than demonic. So, although my opinion is that the spirit realm, the quantum realm, and the alien realm are all one and the same. Yeah. So I think they all operate together.
So do you think that event in 1973 with your aunt, I think that's what year you said it was, do you think that was some kind of ritual? Was she doing something involving you that was ritualistic?
Yeah, well, it's hard. I don't know for sure because I was such a novice. I mean, I didn't know what was going on. I just and it was as if I was kind of out of it too. It's like I was not completely there.
Which could have been part of a ritual. That's why I ask, if you were in some way hypnotized or subdued or something, and this was, and I don't know anything about your aunt other than what you've just told us.
Right.
But this Nazi connection, and we know how involved the Nazis were in the occult. And then the way you've described that event and the kind of the magnetism and the hypnotic qualities that your aunt had, it just makes me very curious about all that.
She was a very attractive lady, even if she didn't have the hypnotic, this kind of mystique about her. But just when you combine all those things together, it's a very powerful thing, and I think she used it to her advantage up until the end. I think she. I don't know if she sought redemption at the end of her life. I wasn't there. My cousin thinks she might have, so I don't know. But I definitely know my experience. I mean, she's the kind of person who could be extremely nice one minute, make you food and treat you very nicely, treat you like a king, and the next minute she's the most evil person you can imagine. Just so awful, and it could just snap just like that, just like snapping your fingers. That's how quickly it could happen.
Well, let's change the topic. Another story that you include in the new book is called Haunted House. Tell us about that. Yeah, because I know that takes place in the Seattle area. Tell us about that.
Well, this idea of the haunted houses, I had occurring dreams about haunted houses, and my theory about it is that I think that every house you've ever lived in, that I've ever lived in, has always had somebody else living in it before me, and I think we leave behind our energies or imprints or whatever, and the more turnover there's been in a house, if it's been a rental house for a long time, the more residual energies there are, and I think we collect those as we move. And I think I've moved 47 times in my life. I counted it up one time. That's pretty ridiculous when you think about it. But
right.
I moved around a lot. Part of it was because I was in the military, but nonetheless, I've had this kind of symbolic haunted house that is really an amalgam of every house I've ever lived in, but not really exactly the one I've lived in. But it's a very powerful nightmarish type dream where each room gets more and more haunted as you go into it, and it's extremely powerful. And I've looked at I've done some research on it, and it's supposed to represent like the subconscious, your conscious, your higher self, or whatever, depending on which floor you're at. And I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I do know that those haunted house dreams have stopped now. Now that I've been on this spiritual journey, I no longer have those haunted house dreams that would be so very disturbing to me. So that's I think I read at one point you thought the house was in Everett. I thought so. Yeah, I thought that was part of it. There's also a house in Tacoma that has elements of it, and that house was actually, I did see an entity there in that house. And also in Everett as well, and there were houses next. There was a house next door that had the twin angels. I think I wrote about that in my first book, about the twin angels that had died, the girls that had died, and they were twins, and they were coming into my two oldest sons when they were kids. They would fly into their room through their window, and the kids would wake me up and say, "Daddy, the twin angels are here again. They're in our room." So I think it's elements of every house I've lived in, and I think I must be attracted to these places, or I have been in the past, attracted to these haunted locations, and the spirits have been attracted to me. It's kind of like I said, it's like you said, I'm kind of a lightning rod, and these things find a way, and they go the path of least resistance. They go to the people who have the radar, have the antennas up,
Yeah, there are 31 of these stories in your book, and we have time to talk about one more here. And one that caught my eye was called "Follow Me." This is about the Roslyn Cemetery. Yeah, haunted cemetery in Roslyn. It's an old mining town, and it's got I think 10,000 people in
I think it was 10,000 in the cemetery, but there's only like 1,000 people that live there, or less than 1,000 people that live in the town. So the dead people outnumber the living quite a bit. But I was there with my girlfriend, and it was on Halloween, of course, and I had to have a scary adventure, a spooky adventure, and she reluctantly came with me, and we went into the graveyard. It was dark, and it was in the evening, and we were walking around looking at all the graves. Some of them were toppled over, and the one that really spooked me the most and was one that it was a kind of leaning over sideways. There was a broken iron gate around it, and it had a hand coming out of the top of it, a carved hand that was part of it. And it said, "Where I lie, you shall soon be, so take my hand and follow me." And then it had the name of whoever the person was. And while this was going on, we saw these weird lights, and we heard branches snapping, and it was extremely frightening. And my girlfriend just, she ran out of there, and of course, which was a smart thing to do. And I followed her, and so that was and it's a well-known haunted graveyard. In fact, I did some research on it and found that the Washington Ghost Historical Society or whatever has done a lot of research there, and it's quite an active site. I'd like to go back there. I haven't been there really since I think the 70s when that happened. But that's what that story is about.
And you again, 31 such stories, and maybe we've already covered it, but which one of those stories is either your favorite or maybe one that you kind of hold as having affected you the most?
Well, I would say what's going on recently, what I had, I'll go back to 1997 and the progenitor. And that's before I really understood exactly who this was. I had the idea that this was I didn't know exactly that it was an ancient alien presence. I just had this idea that it was an original mystic, because I'd had experiences with Native American mystics, and I'd written about them in my first book, but this one was different. It was claiming to be the original, one of the original mystics, from original man, from Cro-Magnon man or whatever, Neolithic man. And I'd always wondered, I tried to share it with a colleague of mine when I got the job here in Southern California, and she was an anthropologist, and she shot me down. She just said, "Well, no, that's not possible. You're a pretty spacey dude." So I just kind of put it aside, and then my paranormal stuff kept happening. And recently, when I got into this, communicating with the spirits, I decided maybe I'm going to try to contact this progenitor again. So I did in November, and I did make contact with the progenitor, and then I found out more of who it was, and I figured out what his name is, and his name is Anzar, and I did some research on the name Anzar and came up with some very interesting connections that I write about. And the most important thing about it is that I'm receiving information that I think is vital to share with people. And the thing is, it's about this paradigm shift I've been talking about. That there is this reveal that's coming. That's I don't know the exact date. I can't give you an exact date, but it's sooner rather than later, where all this stuff will start to come together. The kind of what I'm saying. That the paranormal world, the quantum world, and the alien world are all coalescing. It's all really the same thing.
Yeah.
And people need to be prepared. And I don't mean like panic, like run, like the Armageddon or something. I'm just saying that. Be prepared, because it's going to be quite shocking, and for folks, for some folks, especially folks that are in power. And I think the rest of us just need to be prepared and understand that there are certain basic preparations that we should all make anyway. We shouldn't live our lives as if nothing bad could happen. Because I just think of like what happened to my parents. Who would have thought the Nazis were going to come and take over their whole country? That's pretty hard to imagine. So. Just basic preparation. So I think that's the information I'm getting, and as I've been doing that, trying to understand the impact of that, I had my first UFO experience, which was just recent, on March 14th. Well, I think I might have seen one when I was a kid, but I'm not exactly sure. I need to go back and kind of refocus on those memories. But and this was a witness experience. This was me and my youngest son. We're both outside in the yard, and what Anzar had told me was that the first part of the message will be audio, and then there will be a visual. And I asked him, well, will I be part of the visual? And he said yes. And I said, oh, great. Now I know what he's talking about. And my son witnessed it too. And it wasn't a dramatic, like landing on the lawn kind of thing. It was just, a UFO that was very high up in the atmosphere, but was definitely not moving in any kind of way that anything in our inventory or anything in the inventory that anybody has, any aerial vehicle would move.
Right.
And it also had some lights shooting out of it, a green kind of light, like a beam coming from it as well. And I've described all this, and it's going to be in my third book. But I think it's just part of the continual awakening and going from boggle point to boggle point, because if you would have asked me in 1997, is that definitely, an alien being that you contact? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe, but, I moved beyond that boggle point to another one. And so I'm open to trying to understand this stuff. And I think that's the most important thing is that you try to understand it. You keep yourself and your family and your friends and as many people as you can safe as we go through these changes. And I think everybody would probably admit that we're going through a lot of things in not only in our country but in the world right now that are a lot of threats. So whatever we can do to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe and help each other, I think is a good idea right now.
Yeah, I agree. Bruce, thank you so much for being here. And and thank you for opening up. I know that story about your aunt was a difficult one to tell. And I know you put it in the book, but talking about it is a different story.
It is difficult to talk about. And and you handled it very well. Thank you very much, JV. I appreciate you.
Where can people get a hold of the books?
Amazon. They're both available on Amazon, and ebooks. You can get ebooks, and you can get the printed book. So that's the best place to go. And you shouted out my website a couple times. I appreciate that. And that's where you can go find out the other stuff I do, the more, mundane academic stuff that I continue to do and love doing. I love teaching. So
well, we look forward to having you back when the third in the Trinity comes out.
Thank you very much, JV. I very much enjoyed our conversation.
All right. It's Beyond Reality Radio. We're going to take a break, come back, and wrap things up. Don't go away. Looking for our guest's book? Go to Amazon.com/shop/JVJTaps. I do greatly appreciate him opening up and telling us a story that was very, very difficult for him to tell us. It was a fascinating, but also obviously a very emotional story. His book, again, is called Timeless Deja Vu. If you're watching the YouTube channel, click on the link there, or you can click on the link in one of our posts. If you would, that helps out a lot. Let's see. Tomorrow night, best of program on Beyond Reality Radio. Monday night, another very, very heartfelt program with David Kane, the father of a son who died in the Station nightclub fire in Rhode Island when the fireworks, the pyrotechnics show got out of control, and people weren't able to get out of that burning building. Real tragedy. And David has spent some time trying to reach his son on the other side, and he wrote a book about it called Signs from My Son. He'll be Monday night's guest. Tuesday night, Lyle Blackburn, who is a cryptid researcher, one of the best-known cryptid researchers. We'll be talking about Bigfoot and cryptids in general, plus his new book called Momo, The Strange Case of the Missouri Monster. That'll be the first time we've had a chance to talk about that particular case. So that, too, will be interesting. Again, a great weekend, great week of programs next week. The Shark will be taking over Bruce Marcuson on Thursday night, and he'll be with you the whole following week. Wow. I don't know. I'm going to miss you guys. But either way, it'll be a chance to recharge. All right, that's going to do it for tonight. It's Beyond Reality Radio. Make sure you stop by our Facebook page, give it a like, and we'll catch you next week.
Beyond Reality Paranormal is hosted by J.V. Johnson and produced by Orion Palmer and Slick Eddie Edwards. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please consider supporting the program either through your podcast platform, click on the link in the description, or on Patreon at Joha Productions. If you'd like to be a guest on Beyond Reality Paranormal, or you have a recommendation for a guest, contact our producer, Slick Eddie Edwards. Eddie is spelled with a Y at slickeddieedwards@gmail.com.